Hi class, so today we're going to look at the properties of water. Our instructions for this assignment are to listen as many times as you need to. You can always pause and go back to make sure you understand everything clearly, and to learn a little bit more about the properties of water. You also need to take 1 page of notes. I said that you can use any note-taking strategy that you have or that you'd like to use, and I am curious to see what that looks like, how it's organized, and how efficiently it's actually working. But if you do not have your own note-taking strategy currently that you are going to use, then I strongly suggest this one. So this is Cornell style or 2-column notes. So you'll see that in 2-column notes, you have to break your page into 2 parts. So we have a narrow column to the left and a wide column to the right. In the narrow column, you're going to put key points or ideas, so that would be like the title of each slide. In the wide column, you're going to put supporting details for that slide. And please remember, don't write everything word for word. You can always summarize and just take out the key points and diagrams you would like to add to your notes. So let's start with some quick facts about water. So we should all know that the formula for water is H2O, so that just means that there's this 2-to-1 ratio of hydrogen to oxygen in water. Water makes up at least 60% of our bodies, so estimates range from 60 to 75% of our bodies by mass. So that means that if we weighed you, and you weighed 50 kilograms, then 30 kilograms or more would be water. We also said that if you were without water, you could only survive for 3 to 7 days. And the recommendation is that an adult drink about 2 to 3 liters of water each day, so make sure you stay hydrated. So let's take a look at the internal structure of water molecules. So if we're looking at the 2 parts, so we have oxygen and then we have hydrogen. So oxygen has 6 valence electrons on its own. So that means it has 6 electrons in that outermost orbital. And 8 electrons will fit in that outermost orbital. So if the outermost orbital is full, that means that the atom is most stable. So it's in a more stable condition. So hydrogen is always looking to gain 2 electrons from other atoms. So knowing that each hydrogen has just 1 electron, oxygen often bonds with hydrogen, and in doing so completes that outer orbital with its 8 electrons. Okay, so making it a more stable molecule. But oxygen and hydrogen vary a bit. So oxygen, though it is bonded to hydrogen and sharing these electrons with the hydrogen, oxygen does not like to share the electrons fairly. So it is very, very electronegative, and it has a huge, strong attraction toward electrons. So it turns out that most of the electrons, or the electrons spend most of their time around the oxygen, which you saw in the first model of the POGL on water. So because of this uneven sharing, or this uneven distribution of charge in the water molecule, because oxygen is monopolizing these electrons, okay, so the electrons find themselves on this side of the molecule, it leads to different charges. So because the electrons are negatively charged and they spend most of their time around the oxygen, there's a slight negative charge on the oxygen side of the molecule. Because the electrons don't spend that much time here on the hydrogens, each hydrogen has a slight positive charge. And this is what polarity is. So that's what it means. So one side has a positive charge and the other side has a negative charge. The polarity of water molecules has a huge impact on the behavior of water. So if we're looking at the polarity, the polarity makes the water molecules kind of like magnets, so like really weak magnets because they have these 2 poles. So here we have diagrams, or a diagram of 1, 2, 3 water molecules with a brief reminder. So this we found out in our POGL as well. if we look at one individual water molecule, so this is an individual water molecule, we see that the oxygen and the hydrogen within the same molecule have a polar covalent bond. So a covalent bond is a type of bond in which electrons are shared. The polar part means that they're not shared evenly. So the electrons spend most of their time around the oxygen. So again, this leads to these positive and negatively charged sides of our water molecule. So because we have all of these water molecules interacting with each other, floating around near each other, we see that they interact. So the positive side, or the positively charged hydrogen of one molecule will be attracted to the negatively charged oxygen of a different molecule. And so these are represented by these dashed lines. So these are different molecules. So this is one water molecule, this is a second water molecule, and this is a third water molecule. So this attraction between different molecules, this is what is referred to as a hydrogen bond. Okay, this weak attraction between the molecules. So if we look at the title of the slide, it says intermolecular forces. So this has to do with how one molecule interacts with other molecules. So it's these intermolecular forces, these hydrogen bonds, that cause or lead to most of the properties that were observable within our lab. So one of the main ones that leads to a lot of the properties we're going to look at in the next couple of slides is cohesion. So cohesion means that water molecules stick to one another, so they're attracted to one another. So now let's take a look at some properties of water that hopefully we observed within our lab. So the first one is surface tension. And a lot of people said the surface tension when we looked at the properties of water. We had to write our own. So I want you to consider how surface tension relates to the intermolecular forces, those polar hydrogen bonds between the different molecules, because we have to have an understanding of what's happening at a molecular level in order to really understand surface tension. So this surface tension that water has allows things to float on water, and most people got the paperclip to float on water, but in reality, organisms can live and float on or walk on the surface of the water as well. So if we look, this is not a mosquito. I know that it kind of looks like a mosquito, but it's an insect called a water strider. So it's a water insect that essentially walks across the surface of the water. We also saw that soap breaks hydrogen bonds. So soap is non-polar, and if soap molecules get in between the hydrogen bonds of the water, it'll cause those molecules to separate, so breaking that surface tension. We also saw in the part where I utilized the spirit burner and tested the plain paper cup and the paper cup filled with water, that the paper cup that had water in it did not heat up as quickly. So it didn't catch fire as the other one did. So this is called a high specific heat. So water can absorb a lot of energy and changes temperatures really slowly. We also saw within the lab something called capillary action. So we went and we saw that if we use a regular straw in the water, then really the regular straw, which is maybe 3/4 of a centimeter in diameter, will only take the water into the very bottom of the straw. But when we use the teeny tiny capillary tube, it almost appeared that it was sucking the water up into the tube, and I think that the water moved up at least 1.5 centimeters. So this capillary action is also due to these properties of water, the polarity of water, and its cohesiveness, the way that the molecules stick to one another, but also because water can be adhesive, so it can also stick to other things as well. And this really helps plants take in water from the soil. So without this property, it would be very challenging for plants to take water from their roots all the way up to the tips of their leaves. And the structure within plants that does this is called the xylem. So that's a really fun name, xylem. So the xylem works like the capillary tube. So it takes water all the way up from the roots to the tippy tops of the plant, all the way to the tips of the leaves. But then a few more observable properties. So we saw that we could dissolve the salt very easily in water, and water is considered the universal solvent. So that means that you could dissolve most things in water. So that includes, salt and sugar. We will soon talk about our circulatory system as well, and our blood is made up of, I think, 85% water, and that helps for us to be able to dissolve things within our blood and move them around our bodies or transport them within our circulatory system to all of our cells. The other thing that we did is we took the pH of water. So the pH tells us about the behavior of the water and the different types of ions that are present in a substance. So we saw that water should have fallen somewhere in the neutral zone. So between 7 and 8, just depending on the state of the water, because we know that water that comes out of the tap is not necessarily 100% pure. There are some other things in there as well. But the neutrality of water does make it an ideal condition for life. So it's able to kind of neutralize or regulate acids and bases. If we look at other things on this scale, so some people were not that familiar with the acid and base scale, and that's fine. And I hope that you'll talk about it a lot in physical science this year. But what this is telling us is it's telling us about these concentration of charged particles, so these hydrogen ions or this hydroxide ions within a substance. So if we look, acidic substances have a lot of hydrogen ions, and basic substances produce a lot of hydroxide ions, which are negatively charged. Now, things within the center, honestly, are pretty easy for us to handle. So things around 7 or 8, okay, are fairly comfortable for us, things that we could consume, all right? If you think about things that you would drink or eat, things in this neutral zone do not often lead to, let's say, an upset stomach. However, when we look at the other zones, as we move into the other zones, we get to things that might lead to an upset stomach if you eat too much of them. Like, for example, if we go into the acidic zone. So things that fall into the acidic zone are like your citrus fruits, like lemons and limes, oranges as well, tomatoes we can see there. And these can be things that if you consume them in really high quantities can lead to things like heartburn or acid reflux for those people who maybe have a low tolerance for these acidic foods. Okay. If we go further, we can see that within our own system, okay, within your own body, you have within your stomach digestive juices that are highly acidic, and that's to help break things down. And if we move into the other side, so we go from the acidic to the basic. Some people forget about the basic things, but basic substances can also be dangerous. So if we look at the acidic side, extremely acidic things can essentially burn your skin. Okay, so they'll give you a chemical burn on your skin. But the same is true for basic items. So if we look at things that are extremely basic, they are also extremely dangerous if they have contact with your skin or your body tissue. Okay? So water falls in this happy neutral zone, which makes it fairly easy for things to live in. So I think if we look at the time, I have made it to just under 15 minutes, and I did say I had a 15-minute limit. So if you have any questions or you didn't understand something, make sure that you go back and take a look at it. Remember, we're looking for one page of notes, the best you can do.